So let's move on to the second concept, or we will do in this batch these four concepts, concept 2 to 5, speed, standardization, connectedness, and migration. Speed, concept 2, is basically more straightforward. It is connected to new technology. It's connected to the possibilities that the new technology, all kinds of technology, but particularly information technology, has created to for us to be able to communicate faster. It's possible to exchange information without any time delay at all. It's not really using time. So this is very much then part of what we talked about in the first part of this lecture, and what the geographers refer to as time-space compression. Time and space becomes partly irrelevant, or at least much less relevant than it used to. So speed is about this, the speed of information flow, but it is also about production in general, industrial production and production of services, that has, and production of information, of knowledge, that has increased because of this possibilities that the information technology creates. So production, and then also our consumption of it, has become faster. It happens with an increased speed. In research, it is now possible to share new research at a much higher speed than or much faster than it used to. It took years to get penicillin, which was kind of found or invented or discovered, I think around 1940 or just before the war. It took years and years for that to get into common practice. Second World War was even speeding it up, but still it took years. For Ebola, when we had the outbreak of Ebola in West Africa some time ago, it took maximum weeks to kind of get a response to that, and months to get a adequate containment of it, which is still a lot of time. A lot of people lost their lives, but it makes a difference. And in all fields of research, the sharing worldwide, or mostly worldwide, makes a difference. So the speed has kind of created a qualitative change, and this the speed of production, but also of consumption, raises some new questions. And one question, which is not really new, the first time I saw that question phrased was in 1972 with the so-called MIT report that phrased the question, are there limits to growth? Are there limits to how much economy can grow, how much the growth of our consumption of natural resources can go on? That was very early on, and their reasoning around this was very much related to speed, because they said if the use of resources, but also pollution, also population growth, doubled with a higher and higher speed, so that they could make these exponential diagrams. And exponential growth just has to end. It kind of gets too steep, and it will exhaust or come to a crisis in a way. And they actually, interestingly, found that the eco crisis will be on its peak in 2015. They said that in 1972. Hasn't quite happened like that, but we have become much more aware of the effects of the higher speed that we use resources, and how we pollute our globe, and how that is global. And we will come back to that when we talk about, in the fourth part of this course, the challenges that we face in global health. The third concept is standardization, and also that is pretty straightforward. I mean, keep in mind the picture of the communication, the information exchange in a way, but also other types of exchange. So to be able to communicate, we need some standards, some common denominators, so that we can understand each other. And historically, the first kind of this standardization was a written language. We needed letters so that someone could write something that someone else could understand, could read. So it was, in a way, standardization is metaphorically a common language. It is the possibility to communicate as easy as possible. So what we have, and what Eriksen writes about in standardization, are different aspects of how, I mean, one important thing was money. We needed to be able to trade, to exchange goods and services for a common value, which is money. And we have really, that has changed immensely just over the last 20 years, how we can transfer money, how that has become a kind of what they call an even play field, a level play field. Other types of other phenomena also needed standardization, like time. We needed a world time that was developed in the 19th century. We needed common measures. That hasn't really happened in full yet, but we are able to exchange information with that. But then Eriksen has is obviously fascinated, because he writes about shipping containers. How at some point, where there was transport of goods on ships, that has happened for hundreds of years, but at some point it was a great need of one common size of containers that could be loaded onto ships very efficiently, onto railroad trucks, onto other trucks, to lorries, and be kind of standardized so that they could move easily, and that you could have cranes and equipment to move them that fitted this part. But then there is also some social and cultural standardization. If when we move around in the world, say airports, they're not quite like, but they are standardized in a way that we easily can navigate. When we come to a new airport, we fairly quickly can orient ourselves and navigate there. We come to a hotel, we know that. We know how, although we've never been there before. Not all of them, but quite a lot of them are standardized in that sense. And then a sociologist called, I think it was called Ritzer, wrote a book about the McDonaldization of the world, how things are standardized with food and also other things, and shops, shopping malls, clothes, but food. McDonald's is a kind of a common a global tastelessness, which everyone can eat because it doesn't taste anything particular, or not much anyway, salt, and so it's not, you didn't have to grow up in America and learn to love peanut butter, because McDonald's wouldn't be particularly, although it is American, it wouldn't be, the food isn't particularly American. It's just something that they produce, and when you go into a McDonald's in Paris or in Cairo even, or in India, which surprised me, it's pretty much the same. It's pretty standardized. So this is something that also relates to other parts than the very practical things of exchange. The fourth concept is connectedness, and this is kind of the same thing about the possibilities of being connected through communication technology, and the connectedness is and the exchange of, to be connected and to exchange information makes a lot of possibilities for us. It's information, but we will also be connected and be able to exchange material goods, say 3D printers and so on. And the connectedness has changed the world economy. It's kind of been possible. It's possible to connect in networks that has changed production and has changed the way the economy works. And we will also come back to that in the next part about how that affects the world economy and the government of that. And it has become more difficult to kind of govern the world economy after this type of globalization took off and became so kind of was brought to the next level as it has in globalization over the last 20 years. But the connectedness, it has affected the economy and kind of the big multinationals. It has also affected social relations in a very significant way, and the most obvious is social media. We can connect, we can be a part of networks that are much bigger. We can keep up with the everyday life of a much bigger entourage than we used to, because we are connected through Facebook or other media. I follow my grandchildren on a daily basis, although they live in other towns, through Snapchat. So this the social connection has its positive and very important effect on the kind of closeness. The first time I realized this was in 1993 in Bosnia. I was working there with relief work during the war, and I met parents that sent their children to, no, it was in 95, because the internet was becoming more common, and they sent their children to the United States or Canada, out of the country, out of the conflict zone, to keep them safe. But one of the reasons why that was easier for them than it had been would have been 10 years earlier was that they could communicate through email. So the possibility of keeping close contact was much better than it had been just earlier. So that was 1995. That was kind of when it happened, I think. And this is, of course, very significant for refugees today. And a little while ago, New York Times had a very touching article about Syrian refugees in Canada, and how it was actually quite stressful for them, because they had 20 emails or Facebook connections a day with people in Syria, in refugee camps in Lebanon, asking them to help. So this connectedness makes a difference in many aspects of our life. One thing that has become apparent is, I mentioned the economy and the economic aspect, the social and the kind of the social networking we can do. But the social networking makes it also possible to act politically. So political mobilization that we saw at the Tahrir Square in Cairo in 2011 with what we call the Arab Spring was apparently very much mobilized through social media. So social media can be very important to political mobilization, and that has been realized. But when we saw the development in Egypt after 2011 and the start of, or it wasn't the start, it started in Tunisia, but the development of the Arab Spring in Egypt, we also could clearly see that social media is not equally distributed. It was only a part of the Egyptian society that had access, that could act on the social media. And the same would be in Ukraine and in other places, where in Turkey, where social media has been used extensively to mobilize demonstrations. It isn't an even play field. Okay, let's move on to the fifth concept. And I've written migration because that's what it really is, but in Eriksson's book it's mobility. Mobility. And mobility is kind of as old as mankind, since whatever we were, however we came to this world, in the Garden of Eden, somewhere in East Africa probably. I think it was in Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania. And we spread all over the world. It was about migration, it was about mobility. So mobility is absolutely nothing new. But
it is, and think of mobility as the physical moving of people and objects. But let's concentrate on people. It's not new in recent history either. I mean, the US and Canada are results of huge population migrations. And a lot of historical events have come out of mobility, or the moving of big population groups. But mobility has been stimulated to a great extent by the connectedness, by the standardization, and by the possibilities of speed in traveling, in communicating. So it has become something that we can see as slightly different, or yeah, it is some qualities about the level of or the intensification of speed, and the amount of networking, and the facilitation of standardization that makes mobility and migration probably a bit different today than it was before, and with these qualities of globalization that we have discussed. Mobility or migration is also far from an even play field. From a European perspective, from in a global to global standard, the rich part of the world, mobility is easy. It's considerably cheaper to travel today than only 20, 30 years ago. The Schengen area, which is the European Union minus Great Britain, we can travel without a passport. We can relocate, we can take a job, we can take education, we can get health services covered by our national health service. It's very much easier than it used to be. And this, the possibility of the mobility of jobs and job seekers, and services and money and goods it's the idea behind the European Union, and it was very important for the Central and Eastern European countries when they wanted to join the European Union. But if you come from Africa, Middle East, even India, it's much harder to get a visa. It's tremendously difficult to get a job in Europe or in the US. So this is not a, it is another aspect of globalization that reinforces the class division, or the inequality in the world. And the way the European Union is reinforcing its outer borders is a very clear sign on this division worldwide. Should be mentioned that this, because of this inequality, and because of the role that money plays in the possibility to migrate, or to mobilization, to mobility, it's also been stimulating to crime. So the amount of human trafficking, I mean, it's an old phenomena that say women or girls that fell outside the society or the community in rural areas, moved into the town, couldn't find a livelihood, became prostitutes. That has happened for ages. But the systematic trafficking of women that we see today, I don't think we have seen ever before. It's kind of a new slave trade. So maybe we saw it during the slave trade, but it is very significant. Trade of human organs, other parts of, rare species of animals. This type of moving things, the mobility of things, that has reached new proportions. So what I want to say about these four aspects, or these four concepts, is that I think mobility and migration here is the central concept. And look at that concrete. It is the moving of people and objects and information. And that is an aspect of the globalization that is very important, and it is kind of it's speeded up by communication technology. It's facilitated by standardization, and it's kind of made get a different dimension through the extended connectedness that we find in the world today. So these are kind of aspects reinforcing the migration and the mobility. So go through these, read the book on these concepts, and then we'll go on to the last concepts and finalize the book in the next session of this lecture 1.